When you mix spooky season slashers with Christmas movies, you get Black Christmas. Black Christmas is one of the best horror movies of all time, and to hear more, stay tuned for my review. Hello ladies and gentlemen, my name is Dominic from the channel Dominic Talks Movies, and today I'm going to be reviewing the 1974 slasher film Black Christmas. This film stars Olivia Hussey, Keir Dullea, Margot Kidder, and John Saxon. As their winter break begins, a group of sorority sisters, including Jess and Barb, begin to get anonymous, lascivious phone calls. Initially, they think nothing of it, until the calls begin to keep happening and get more frightening. Soon, Barb's friend Claire goes missing from the sorority house, and a local teenage girl gets murdered, leading the girls to suspect a serial killer is on the loose. If you're impatient, here are my quick thoughts. I thought it was an exceptional film, truly a unique and amazing film to come out of a genre that has plenty to offer. This is one of the few horror movies that genuinely scared me and had me on the edge of my seat for basically the entire runtime. There's some brilliant editing, cinematography, some great POV camera shots, and also some really good experimental stuff that I honestly really liked, and it genuinely worked for me. Unfortunately, if you're not a conventional horror fan, this film might not appeal to you because it is genuinely a freaky movie, and if you don't like horror movies, then this will definitely scare you quite easily. But I still recommend you giving it a try because I do think it is a one-of-a-kind horror film and one of the best of all time. Now for those of you who want my detailed thoughts. First of all, thank you for sticking around and wanting to hear what I have to say about this film. It really means a lot, and I really just want to get into the deeper, more specific parts of this film that I thought made it what it is. First, I want to address the style and concept of the film. To have a film like this where it could easily be a Halloween film or a Christmas film is not an easy feat to achieve. A few films that did achieve this though are Tim Burton's A Nightmare Before Christmas, Gremlins, and of course Black Christmas. Now the thing that I think separates Black Christmas from those two other films is the fact that it is more scary and it has the more Halloween-y side of the genre, if you will. I think it is definitely more scary than either of those other films, and although the Christmassy aspects of it are not as apparent, it still takes place on Christmas, and I think the only other film that really is like a Christmas-centric film is A Nightmare Before Christmas, because that is an integral part of the plot. But same thing about Gremlins, similar to Black Christmas, it doesn't really revolve around Christmas, it just takes place on Christmas, and I think that is what makes this film kind of stand out. So compared to Gremlins, they are both similar in the Christmassy aspect where they just take place on Christmas, but then the horror aspects of Black Christmas are far better than Gremlins, and I think it just works way better as a horror movie in general. Out of these three films, it is definitely by far the scariest, and honestly it is one of the scariest horror movies that I have ever seen. Maybe this has to do with the fact that I haven't seen all that many horror movies, but for the most part I typically don't get scared that much in horror movies, and this one really made my skin crawl. There were some really creepy moments, and I'm not going to spoil anything because this is a non-spoiler review, but there were a few scenes where I genuinely, my heart was like thumping and I was pretty scared, and that does not happen often, so that is definitely an achievement for this film, and I have to give it some brownie points in the horror side of things for that. On the Christmas side of things, as I said before, it doesn't really feel like it's having that Christmas-centric vibe that a film like The Nightmare Before Christmas has, but it does take place on Christmas, and I think the atmosphere of the film gives off the vibe that it is on Christmas, that it is in the wintertime, and I think that achieves what it wants to achieve. It doesn't want to be a Christmas-centric film, it just wants you to know that it takes place on Christmas and it's wintertime. It does that perfectly. The atmosphere of this film, while being winter and Christmassy, is also very dark since it is a horror film, and I think the atmosphere and just the wintry sort of vibe that it goes for is definitely what it achieved. Overall, it has a pretty solid balance of Christmas and horror aspects, but it's definitely a more horror-centric film, which is exactly what I wanted from it. So for that, I have to give it props. The editing is extremely crisp and it instills fear in a really concise and efficient manner. It doesn't ever feel pretentious or out of place, but it does use some extremely effective editing techniques that do feel in your face, but not too much to the fact where it's kind of throwing you off while you're watching the film. It still feels like it flows naturally as a part of the movie. The cinematography most of the time is relatively simple, and I think that is exactly what it was trying to do, because the primary focus of this film is the amazing story and characters, while the cinematography, simple yet very, very good, does take the back burner for most of the film. And I think that is exactly what it should have done, and it did it very, very well. There were a couple scenes where the cinematography was really amazing, and specifically the shots that I liked the most were the POV shots when we had the camera on the killer. Now, I read something about the fact that one of the cameramen actually played the killer because they had a custom rig built so that he could have the rig on his body, and then he would have the camera right beside his head so that he could move around and like move his hands and throw stuff around, and it all looks like it's in the perspective of the killer. And I just think that's absolutely brilliant filmmaking, and it was just super cool. The POV shots, as I said before in the other editing parts, none of it felt pretentious or out of place at all, and it really worked to build suspense, and it was definitely unique in that manner, because although other films do use POV shots, especially slashers, this one was really effective because other ones are very still, is like in Halloween, for example, when we're in the POV cam of young Michael, it's like the camera's like still, so his head would be like just rigid in place and kind of just like stabbing someone like that, and that just is not realistic. Where in this film it moves because the cameraman is moving, so it looks like a normal human movement, and I just think this is just brilliant. Whoever came up with this rig for the camera and whoever was the cameraman is just an absolute genius. It worked incredibly well. It gave a feel of realism in the POV shots that I've never seen before. And also it really gives a creepy vibe when you're in a POV shot and he's stalking one of the girls, and you can see that he's watching them, but they have no idea that he's watching them, and it just builds so much suspense. It instills fear inside you, and I think this just works brilliantly. And again, I cannot praise whoever did the cinematography for this film, because they are an absolute genius. It just worked perfectly to build suspense and fear, and everything about that just worked great. Finally, for the positives, the screenplay was amazing. It is a really unique concept of how this psychopathic killer is on the loose, killing girls in this sorority house, and then just calls them in their house after and makes these really disturbing phone calls. And it's just a really creepy concept that is honestly written incredibly well. The screenplay for this film and the script is really great. The dialogue is not amazing, but it definitely does its job. It's not bad dialogue by any means, but the phone calls were the thing that stood out to me because they were extremely creepy. And let's just say, after I watch this film, I'm not going to be picking up my phone for at least a week, because I'm not trying to hear that dude on my phone. Now moving on to the negatives of the film. To be completely honest with you, I really don't have almost any. I think the main flaw with this film is it actually being a scary horror movie, which a lot of horror movies aren't too scary, and this one really is. So if you're not a horror fan, specifically, that might take away from your enjoyment of the film if you even decide to watch it, which I really implore you to broaden your horizons, take a step outside of your comfort zone, because horror is really an amazing genre so much variety and so much potential for creative horror movies to be made in the future. So I think if you guys don't like horror films, you should really try to take that step, and you can experience films like this one, like Black Christmas, and even films like Psycho, which are just phenomenal movies and some of the best movies of all time in my opinion. But regardless of that, there are still a couple of minor pacing issues in the first act, but they really didn't bother me whatsoever, so I would say this movie is almost flawless. Overall, Black Christmas is a one-of-a-kind horror film that perfectly balances the mixture of Halloween slasher vibes and Christmas vibes, and it is overall one of the best horror movies of all time. It is in my top 3 horror movies of all time and in my top 25 movies of all time, period. Now, with that being said, I'm going to give Black Christmas an A+. And that is going to do it for my review of Black Christmas. If you enjoyed this review, definitely make sure to leave me a like down below, and also subscribe to my channel because I'm going to be getting back on that video grind. I'm going to be posting more movie reviews, hopefully going to get a few rankings out soon, so definitely hit that notification bell so you will be the first to know whenever I upload those videos. Also, comment down below what films you'd like to see me review next. I have a couple films already on my watch list that I'm going to watch and review, but I might get onto some of your guys' recommendations, so definitely make sure to leave those comments. But that is going to do it for this video, guys. I'm Dominic Talks Movies, and I'll see you in the next one.